Hello, everybody, and welcome to this ultimate analysis of Enphase, as I am calling it. This is a megazode. This is going to be a very large episode of Beat the Denominator today because I have gathered essentially all of my thoughts on Enphase and why I think it's a tier 1 stock for me. For me, Enphase is a stock that sits right next to Tesla as a clear multi-bagger in the future for me. No investment advice, of course, but I really believe in Enphase. And I really wanted to have this video where I spend the time going through my full thesis on Enphase. So this is going to be a long one. I'm going to go through 11 separate points. Each of them could make a separate video, but I'm putting them together in this mega episode for the sake of simplicity. But I'm going to start with the macro trends, the revolution, why it's the cheapest energy, the government support, the environment. Then I'm going to move to Enphase itself and how the company sits in comparison with the competition. So we're going to have to dig into the technology, why microinverters, why they're better than string inverters, why ecosystems matter, why installers are needed, what type of competition they're facing, and then we'll finish up with a company talking about management, the link to TJ Rogers and Cypress Semiconductors. We'll also talk about the scale and the optionality that Enphase can eventually achieve, and we'll finish with the numbers, the forecast, and the adoption curve, and where we are in the adoption curve for residential solar. And I can already tell you we're very early. Residential solar in the US, the adoption is at 4%, sitting at 4%, meaning that this is a company who's just at the beginning of its S-curve, just like Tesla's, for example. Tesla are about 4% of vehicles sold in the US. They're just about as early on, both of these companies. They're both tier 1 stocks for me. Enphase right now is much cheaper in the market. We'll also go through this. So I hope this is a video that is going to age well. Much of the content here that I'm going to cover is still going to be valid years from now. So hopefully if you're watching this a year from now or 2 years from now, please know that this is likely not changing much. I'm going really deep into the fundamentals and the qualitative reasons as to why one would want to own Enphase. This is not investment advice. This is just my opinion. So let me get started with 11 parts. I'm going to get started with the first part, which is technological revolution. As you can see, you can know where you are for each of these slides. So let me begin with the first macro change, which is a technological change. There is a major change going on right now. It's called the solar revolution. Solar is a revolution. The fact that we're able to generate electricity straight from the sun is simply a fusion explosion in the sky, is absolutely revolutionary. If you go back in the history of the world, we first started to domesticate fire and use fire to create heat, and then electricity, right? It's been around for thousands of years. Fire is just a dead forest. What creates that? It's the sun. The sun grills organic matter, which then turns into wood, which then is burned to generate electricity. Then we've had coal, which is just a long dead forest. Then we've had oil, which is just a fossilized forest. But at the end of the day, we still use the sun through this very inefficient organic matter, decaying organic matter that we're burning to then generate electricity. That's highly inefficient. Here comes the silicon revolution of the 50s, 60s, 70s, and here comes the first solar panels, which we owe to the space race. And these first solar panels started a lab experiment, and we just had this idea of exciting electrons, I'm simplifying, but exciting electrons on wafers of silicons, tiny wafers of silicon. Now, what's the major benefit of that? You don't have to go through this 50-year, hundreds of thousands of years and then millions of years long process to go from sun to fuel and from fuel to electricity. You're going directly from fusion in the sky, the sun, to electricity. And this is where Enphase comes in, right? We have the solar panels, and I'll get into why I don't invest in solar panels themselves, because I believe them to be a commodity. But then once you generate that electricity, there is a little problem, and that's the reason for Enphase. We humans use AC, alternating current. Everything we do is using alternating current. Why do we use alternating current? Because whenever you generated electricity in the past, you had to burn something. And when you burn something, you generate steam. And then once you generate steam, you turn a turbine. And that turbine generates electricity, and it creates a sinus. And that sinus is alternating current, up, down, up, down, up, down. That's the reason why we use AC, because historically, for 100 years plus, electricity has been generated through turbines. And now we are generating electricity straight from exciting electrons on silicon. So it's DC, it's direct current. Most of our system, most of our homes, everything we operate still works with AC current. AC current is the norm around the world. So for that, we need inverters, and that is where Enphase comes in. Enphase creates inverters to use directly electricity in our homes from the solar energy, which is generated as DC, right? Photovoltaics generates DC. We need an inverter to make it usable for all of our everyday uses. And we also need an inverter to make it usable after we store it. And electricity is stored as DC energy, right? It's straight solar panel to the battery, and then from the battery to the use, right? And we store them in batteries, which are just electrochemical devices. That's all batteries are. So this is for the revolution. From a first principle standpoint, it is much more efficient to generate energy directly from the sun without having to go through any sort of fossilized matter, organic matter. We've been doing it much more efficiently this way. It's a much more efficient way to do it, and that's why it's a revolution, and that's why I believe it will win. It will tremendously win over fossil, over long dead forest, and over wood. It will win. That's point number one. I've put that point out of the way. To invest in Enphase, you have to believe in this solar revolution, which I strongly believe in. Second of all, solar is the cheapest source of energy, but we also don't need that much solar in order to power our everyday life. Panels are getting more and more efficient, and I'll get into this in the next slide. But we don't need as much space than we need. In solar, that we thought we needed just years ago. In solar, when you start thinking about solar energy, and if you have data that's 2 years old, that data is wrong. Right? And most entities update their data on a 5-year basis. Right? This is a space that moves extremely, extremely, extremely fast. At the current state, in the current stage, with the current modern day panels, most homes have enough roof space for 7 to 9 times their current needs. Most single-family homes have enough roof space for 7x to 9x their current needs. That's why when you drive around, you will seldom, almost never see a roof covered with solar panels. It's typically just a tiny section. And it's the section that's like the most well-placed, but you'll never see them covered. Because if you covered the whole roof, you'd have way too much energy. This is what we're getting into, this revolution. You're going to have way too much energy in the future. If you want to learn more about these calculations, I suggest watching Tony Seba. Tony Seba goes a lot into that S-curve and the S-curve that solar is doing, and how solar is just about revolutionizing everything that we do, just like oil and gas revolutionized back then everything we did, right? We moved from working in agriculture, all of us, to, well, essentially all of us, to a world where nobody works in agriculture, less than 1% today. That was because of oil and gas and abundant energy. We are seeing an equal revolution right now with solar. Solar is going to bring untold disruption because energy is going to be nearly free. Remember, 7 to 9x times what you need with your roof covered in solar panels. That's the current reality of today. So there will be free electricity for your EVs, free electricities to run servers, to make money, free electricities to generate your own clean water, free electricities to grow your own food. There will be revolutions on top of the PV, the photovoltaic revolution. There will be revolutions sitting on top of that we don't see coming yet. The first one, first of all, is obviously your EV, right? People right now, they're just sizing a 1x. They're doing a 1x their current need because they have a gas car. But when you're going to have an electric car, you're going to charge that electric car at home for free from the energy on your roof. Now, it doesn't matter if you park your car 12 hours in the garage on a weekend to charge it, or if you have your roof panels charging a battery, which then, through a transformer, loads your car at a much higher tension, much higher voltage, such that you can charge your car at home for like 5 minutes, right? And get a full charge. That really doesn't matter. What matters is there's enough sun hitting our homes for you to be able to charge 1 EV, 2 EV, 3 EVs, and more. There's going to be more left over. And by the way, this is true even in cold climates. This is true even in cold climates, which is very important. Even in the winter, it's important to think about that. It's mind-boggling. What are some of your things that we're going to do? Right? I often say one of the current. It's kind of, it's kind of a joke in the solar community, but people who have excess energy are mining Bitcoin. Well, mining Bitcoin, that's just an example of running a server. There's plenty of types of servers that you can run to make money. Many of them actually are not to make money. They're non-profits. You're trying to find prime numbers, but there's different ways that you can use extra power to power computers and rent that computer space. So that's definitely going to be an application that I see coming in the future. Perhaps two bigger revolutions that I see coming with abundant energy. Very important to me, in my view, to talk about that. So not only do we get free, quote-unquote, fuel for our EVs from the sun, but here's another one. It's generating your own clean water. And this is companies that, if one of those ever comes public, I'll be interested in investing in this, because this is a revolution. So this is an example. This is slightly bigger than a big AC unit. And this is an example of an atmospheric water generator, right? So it generates a gallon of water, clean water, for about 8 cents of power. Assuming it's 10 cents a kilowatt hour power cost, it's going to generate a gallon of water. Now, here's the thing. Power is not going to cost 10 cents. It's gonna be nearly free. It's gonna be nearly free from the moment you paid off those solar panels, which are gonna get much cheaper with time. We'll see this in the next slide. That also means you're gonna be able to have free water, because simply this is simply a AC unit, right? A pump, a heat pump that's being turned in reverse, and that generates water for you. It's an atmospheric water generator. It just cools a bunch of air around and gets water out. Right? So that's free water. That's a major deal. Think about the disruption to the utilities. I've described to you a disruption of electric utilities, which then also leads to a disruption of water utilities. I strongly believe in that. Another revolution coming, and this is of course 10 years out in my view, but is the revolution of food and food growing. We see these come more and more in different places, but these are food growing appliances, right? If you have water, if you have electricity, you can grow your own food. And so are we going to have major fridges in our home that just grow food for us, fully automated? You maybe have a $8 a month monthly subscription to some AI service that takes care of growing everything, but you just grow it in a controlled environment, and you get your own food, you grow your own food. So what do we get, right? We get more reliable power because it's on your roof, you're not dependent on the grid. You get cleaner water. There's been a lot of issues sometimes in communities with water not being good. This is the most pure water ever. You're generating pure H2O. You just have to add some minerals to it at the end of a process, and minerals are dirt cheap. And you're going to get highly controlled food that you're just growing in your house. This is just a consequence of this revolution, of this solar revolution. There's a lot of stuff that we can do with that nearly free energy, right? It's beyond just powering 2 or 3 cars. This is going to go beyond. And so major revolution coming in solar. I strongly believe in solar. I've made a few videos on the channel talking about how solar is worth it for just about anybody now. You get about a 5-year payoff when you install solar. And people are slowly catching up to that reality, just like they are slowly catching up to the reality of EVs. But it's easy to drive around and you see more and more Teslas on the road and more electric vehicles on the road, it's going to be easy. It's already easy where I live in Texas to drive around, and you see more and more solar on roofs because there is a true technological revolution underlying this trend. So let me move on now to the cheapest energy. Why is solar becoming the cheapest energy? Well, this is a story of scale, and this is a story of manufacturing and a story of silicon. Solar panels are the new commodity. Let's be honest. Most solar panels today are made in China. Most of them. The US is starting to catch up with the IRA bill, but today the solar panels, just like a lot of the batteries, they're mostly made in China in giant facilities, and they get that, I'm going to call it Asian magic, in the sense that solar panels are getting better and cheaper every single year. A good analogy to understand solar panels would be flat screen TVs. Do you go year after year, say in a Walmart, and look at the price of flat screen TVs? You're probably amazed by how much cheaper they're getting and how much bigger they're getting every single year. Cheaper, bigger, better. This is the same story for solar panels. Solar panels have seen a major decrease, right? A 1 order of magnitude decrease in their cost in 10 years. But that's not it. The power of each module has seen major increases, with the average module in 2009 being 290 watts. And today, a mono module of similar size, you're getting to 600 watts. So that's more than a doubling in power of the module, right? And on a per watt basis, because panels are typically bought on a watt peak basis, that's a 10x decrease in price. That's just in 10 years. And by the way, if you don't think this will continue, well, first of all, you gotta talk to the folks of Moore's Law, because really we're getting down to 3 nanometers chips, and with computing we see that it just keeps going, and the decline in cost keeps getting better. Obviously, at some point we're gonna be stopped by the physics, and I'm not denying that solar energy, you're gonna have a physical limitation sooner than, say, computations, but for the time frame that we're interested in, we're getting nowhere near that doubling in efficiency, right? There's going to be at least, we have at least another doubling in the cards when you look at labs. Labs right now, labs are getting in the 40% efficiency for solar panels. Right now, the best solar panels are in the 20-ish% efficiency. Labs right now are at 40%. So do we have a doubling left in the efficiency of solar panels on our roof? Yes, that's what we can see right now. Who knows how great the efficiency is going to move in the labs 10 years from now? Will it be 60, 70% efficiency? I wouldn't doubt it. Then add another 10 years, and that's the panels you get. So keep in mind, if you see a doubling right now, a doubling in efficiency, that means those figures double. That means you get a 14, right, to 18x your current needs on your roof 10 years from now. Right, so energy is going to become so cheap. Single family homes are going to become very valuable. Everybody's going to want them because of how powerful that energy coming on your roof is going to become. This is going to create major disruptions, right? Solar in a lab, like I said, it's already 2x more efficient than the best panels of 2023. The best panels of today in a lab were 2x better, right? Will we see another 10x decrease in cost per watt over the next year? That's my bet. That is absolutely my bet. There is also a convergence happening with solar, and a lot of the narrative against solar, and fact, frankly, if you go back 10 years ago that was fact, that solar couldn't pick up because batteries were not good enough. Well, here's the thing. We're experiencing similar cost declines in batteries right now. Batteries are seeing the same things as flat screen TVs. They're getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper. Okay, and they're getting better and better and better every year, cheaper and better. So we get this convergence where having battery with your solar now removes all of the downsides of solar that you may have heard in the past, like, what do you do at night, right? Well, you have a battery. That's the big deal. You have a battery, and the battery is going to help you at night, and batteries are getting better and better, cheaper and cheaper, just like solar. So what do you do at night? You have a battery, and you use that battery for your needs. And batteries are really only needed for a few days. You really only need a few days of battery storage for storm days and nights. Like, let's say you get a really bad storm, and there's really not that much sun in say 4 days, and you also have the nights that you add on to that, and you're not willing to change anything into the way you use your energy, you don't want to change a single thing, then in that case you need a battery to last 3 to 4 days. That's about it. That's entirely within reach. Another thing on batteries, and this is a clear up. This is something that often comes up. Is like, how do you do it in the winter? Well, let's keep in mind that batteries are not needed in the winter, contrary to what most people think. There's two reasons why they're not going to be needed for winter periods. The first reason is that there's 7 to 9x the space on a typical roof. So systems are going to be oversized. So all that's going to happen in the winter is you're going to have less excess energy. You're going to have less excess energy. Maybe you can, run less servers, maybe, or charge just 2 electric cars instead of 3. But that's it. That's all that is going to happen. And that's the number one point. The second point too, and this is something that Elon Musk is discussing a lot, has been discussing for a while, but not just him, a lot of other people, is that right now we're heating our homes very wrong, because we're not using heat pumps for our homes. We're using gas, and we're using resistance. So we're creating heat as opposed to taking heat out of the air that's outside the house and moving it into the house. Heat pumps take the hot air outside. When it's cold, there's still hot air, and it takes that warm air from the outside and moves it inside. It's a much more efficient system, and that's also going to be part of a revolution. I believe a major sector that's going to be disrupted is HVAC system and AC units. These are going to be disrupted because, yes, heat pumps are much cheaper than, say, heating systems. So this is why this is the cheapest energy. That's the second macro trend. When you have something that is so cheap, it just gets adopted. There is no way around it. It gets adopted. Inexpensive products get adopted. But in the case of solar, not only are they inexpensive, they are also much better. Let me move on to the third macro trend, the third section in this video, which is government support. And let me ask you about this whenever you have an investment. How often does the government actively support your business? Most of the time the government's neutral. Most of the time. But in some cases, the government is like anti-business. The government doesn't like your business. You have to, right? Ask any SoFi investor, those who have owned SoFi and have been on the roller coaster of SoFi. Ask what happened to SoFi stock whenever there's a new student loan moratorium, right? The stock goes down. People hate it, because the government is hurting the business, right? Ask Airbnb investors whenever a city bans Airbnbs, right? It's like you have some businesses that do not get overwhelming active support from the government. Enphase is one of these very few businesses that are actively supported by governments around the world. Actively supported. It's absolutely insane, the support that these companies are getting. And I mean, it's great for us investors. It's going to be great for us investors. You have companies here that are seen by legitimates by governments, and that governments are pushing for, right? So let's look at the incentives. Like, the government's pushing for solar, so that's going to be a major tailwind for a company like Enphase. So what do you have? In the US alone, 25 states have solar sales tax exemption. 36 states have property tax incentives. There's many more incentives, state tax credits, etc. There's even an entire website, like this is one of them, that is desireusa.org. These websites are specialized in getting you all of the grants from your city, your state, your federal. There's so many different incentives. That's point number one. That's at the state level in the US. Moving on from the state level to the federal level, you have 30% tax credit until 2032. That's so far away. That's 9 years away, right? That means that throughout that S-curve, throughout that adoption S-curve, there will be a major tax credit for these solar setups, right? And you also have 26% in 2033 and 22% in 2034. It feels so weird to talk about these dates, 2035. So they voted help to this sector up until 2035. And this has been passed. This has been voted on. And by the way, these government incentives were true for so many countries. Additionally, Enphase get manufacturing credits, right? They get 11 cents per each watt of microinverter made that they're going to get from the government. They're also going to get credits for making batteries in the US. They get major manufacturing credits in addition to the help that the consumers receive. Right? And the government incentives are true for so many different countries. If you're outside of the US, feel free to leave in the comment what kind of incentives there's for solar in your country. But these are major incentives, which in my view are not needed. I've made a few videos about how these incentives are not needed. Same is true for electric. These incentives are not needed. The government are helping out even more than what would be needed, because that S-curve is going to happen because it is the cheapest energy and because it is a technological revolution. That's why it's going to happen. But government is still pushing and pushing for it. Sometimes it's not even in the form of money that governments are helping out. Governments sometimes are helping in the form of policies, like, for example, California, making solar panel installs mandatory on new builds. This is overwhelming government support, and it's very rare to find this for any company and any stock. And whether it's Tesla or Enphase, they have a big push and a big support from the government, not just talk, not just politicians talking and say, oh yes, we want to support XYZ industry. No, this is a costly signal where they've actually voted for trillions of dollars of support, right? It's not talk in this case, it's actual money that they're giving out. Major push, in my view, for solar in general and for the macro trend of solar energy and Enphase, obviously. Let me move on to the last point in macro trends, which is a little smaller in my view, but was very important for early adopters, which is the environment. I'm calling this environmental desire, but I could call this desire to do good, non-economic returns. There's a lot of non-economic reasons why people get solar still. This was extremely important in the early adopters when solar didn't make any sense. Today, solar makes sense. Today you can't assume that someone who gets solar is an environmentalist anymore. That is not the case anymore. But in the early days, that used to be the case, right? I think it's still an important driver of sales in certain spots. Like if you go in fancy neighborhoods in California, for example, or fancy parts of the US, Europe, it's probably still an important driver of sale in certain areas. But for most of them, to me, this is going to be less of an argument of sales. Nonetheless, there are benefits to solar that are environmental and that drive the sales and drive adoption. I call these also hedonic benefits. So one of the big ones is, and we hear a lot of talk about CO2s and CO2 reduction, and Enphase talks a lot about CO2 reduction, and probably helps them get into a few ESG ETFs and all that good stuff. Good for them, right? Because they get a stronger shareholder base. But nonetheless, there's a few fundamental good things to be said. That's the eventual, right? It's a tenuous link. It's a long-term process, but eventual reduction of pollution, especially from diesel exhaust. I actually read quite a bit about this. Like diesel kills a lot of people from cancer each year, and so if we can get actually electric trucks, and we can get the electric trucks to actually use green energy, right? Solar energy, that can be a major hedonic benefit or environmental benefit. That's not just it. The end of many wildfires. If you see what has happened in California, a lot of these wildfires and fires in general have to do with the grid and a poorly set up electric grid, an aging electric grid. Well, obviously, if each of us have independent power systems that end and begin with our homes, then you have less risk of that. You have other hedonic benefits or environmental benefits, such as energy independence in the face of natural disasters, especially in the case of Enphase system, and we'll see why later You also have an elimination of what we call peaker plants. So the issue with peaker plants is that typically when you have high demand on a grid in a city, that power needs to be produced close by to where it is consumed. And so you actually have still a lot of coal peaker plants that are very close to cities that need to be turned on really quickly. Natural gas is a bulk of peaker plants, but they need to be turned on very quickly. This is a benefit of solar. This actively reduces that, and obviously this is an important driver for early adopters, and if you are more of an environmentalist, that's going to be a major reason why you want to adopt solar. And clearly that market is not fully saturated. You also have a major benefit from a saving of energy standpoint, even though, like I said, with the future abundance of energy that we're going to have, that's going to be less of a discussion, but you have fewer losses due to the transportation of energy. The grid, typically, if you transport energy hundreds of miles, you're going to lose a lot of that energy. You don't do that as much when you produce and consume locally your own energy. The last thing that I'll say in favor of solar, which is fading with time, still fading a little bit, but you still have in some areas a wow or a cool factor associated with having solar on your roofs. This is just like an EV, especially when you have well embedded solar systems and they're black and they have this sleek black roof. You still have that factor going on in a lot of that new energy segment. And there's no denying, if you look at the Tesla Powerwall, for example, the Tesla Powerwall in certain communities is a status symbol. Oh, I got a Powerwall. Come see my Powerwall. It's a status symbol, believe it or not. So you still have some of that cool factor associated with getting solar panels. Virtue signaling oftentimes goes with that. To me, this is the most minor of all of the macro trends that are favoring solar right now, but it is nonetheless worthy of a discussion, which is why I talked about it in this video/episode. Let me move on to now Enphase versus the competition. And we're going to get into the technicalities as to why Enphase, why I like Enphase, and why I like it more than other plays, and why microinverters and the ecosystem, and getting more into the lower level of analysis for Enphase, really looking at the company level now, not the technological level or the revolution level. So let me move on with Enphase versus the competition. Let's talk about microinverters. So, microinverters are still Enphase's main product. And it's the main product that they sell versus the competition. The competition mostly sells string inverters. We're going to get to that in a second. First, let me answer the question, why not focus on panels? Why do I not invest in solar panel companies? Well, first of all, you have China, Chinese maker of solar panels. China has made it a major country-level goal. And as we know, in China, there is oftentimes dumping happening. We've been following that issue with any type of commodity business. But for example, especially steel, for example, in the example of steel, we know there's dumping happening. There's probably dumping happening with solar panels in China. They are very, very much dirt cheap, and it's a low margin commodity business. If you look at, 5 solar panels, most of them look exactly the same. And so you have some solar panels who try to differentiate themselves, and they try to say, oh, we have this all black solar panel. Look at our solar panel, super nice. For example, the first solar solar panel, it's all black. It's supposedly very nice. People are all excited about it. It doesn't change the fact that it's still a low margin commodity business, and that it's never going to be a deal breaker, at least in my view. It's kind of like they've been trying to do that with gas for the longest time, and trying to say, oh, get Chevron with Techron Plus. It's going to make your engine last 10% longer or anything like that. Yeah, people still get regular gas. And the odds are, to me, is that people are still going to get regular panels. They're still going to go to the cheapest per watt, because we're not limited by the space in our roofs. We don't have any roof space limitation. Now, if in the future we get to the point where we need so much energy that we actually need differentiated panels in order to optimize our roof space, then maybe this may move out of a commodity business. But to me, solar panels are a commodity business. They're interchangeable. They work with just about every system, and installers will typically just have a few, and they'll typically go for the cheapest panels. And they're also fairly easy to make. There's no moving parts, for example, in a solar panels. It's a single pane of glass. The manufacturing is very streamlined. And again, like I said, fierce competitors in China. So this is the reason why I'm not investing in panels. Panels are a commodity, just like flat screen TVs. But how about inverters? Well, as a reminder, we need inverters. Why? We need inverters because we use AC current in our homes. AC current does this, right? And solar panels produce energy by exciting electrons on a piece of silicon, and it produced direct current, DC current. So that's the reason why we need inverters, as I briefly mentioned in slide 1 of this episode. So that was my back to high school part. Inverters are needed. You can't do without inverters. It's not possible. AC powers our homes, DC powers EVs, batteries, and when you really think about it, DC powers more and more of the daily electronics that we use. And a little tangent that I'll be on is that Edison might have been right after all. Edison might have been right that DC is better current than AC because, in a way, solar solves all of the issues because you don't need to transport energy far away anymore. You don't need to do any of that. And so you don't have an issue of losses anymore that you used to have. One of the reasons for using AC is that you would lose energy with DC over long distances. And of course, Edison was known to produce a lot of energy through chemical means, just like energy is produced with batteries. Batteries is chemically produced energy, and this reaction produces a DC current. Anyways, that was just a tangent. Maybe 100 years from now, all of our electric systems will be DC again because it makes more sense. But for the time being, AC is what our homes use, right? And we're not going to redo the 83 million single family homes in America. We're not going to redo them. So we need to have AC. And to have AC, we need inverters. Inverters do two things, right? They turn DC into AC. So they take this DC current, which is direct, and they turn it into alternating current, which changes between the minus and the plus. It goes up and down, changes, inverts, if that makes sense. Just like an alternator does, because that's how it used to be generated. So we need inverters for that, to turn DC into AC. We also need inverters to increase voltage, because voltage at the solar panel is much lower than the one we use in our homes, and depending if you're in Europe or the US, it's either 120 or 240. But that's to a lesser extent, though. The bigger job of inverters is, of course, to turn from DC to AC. And microinverters, and this is where I have to get technical as well. I'll be very quick. Microinverters use a mostly electronic process to do that. And I'm not an engineer, but this is something I've discussed with engineers. And it's a diode. It's a bridge of diodes. So what you do is you get 4 diodes, and you wire them in a square shape, and then you are changing your energy from AC to DC, from DC to AC, through diodes. And the way you do that is because of a mostly electronic way of doing that, you only have a very tiny transformer. That's why these microinverters are small and light, and they can be installed easily. On the other end, string inverters rely much more heavily on a large transformer to do that process. They use less electronics and more transformers. If you open a string inverters, any legacy string inverters that they install in solar, they're typically a big bulky box that you have on the wall, and when you open it up, you will find a giant round circle that is covered in copper, that is a large transformers. And most string inverters use large transformers which are very heavy, but they are also a less efficient, older technology. And that's why oftentimes they say, like, when they try to sell string inverters, they'll tell you, oh, well, string inverters are much more reliable because they're older. Well, if you look at the warranty, and the warranty is something very important, microinverters have twice the warranty as string inverters, right? But we don't have the look back on microinverters because they're a fairly new technology. But I believe that's a stretch, although that is a debate. And this is something, if you invest in Enphase, this is something that you're going to have to have your opinion on. Do you believe that turning DC to AC, or AC to DC in the other way, what do you believe is the best way to go? And by the way, if we are to believe the move in consumer electronics that we've seen, in consumer electronics, we've noticed a marked reduction in charger sizes. And this is a similar story. Have you owned a phone in the year 2000s? Right? If you owned a phone in the years 2000s, you probably remember a bulky charger that you would plug in an outlet and it would get warm. It would get fairly hot. That's because it relied on a large transformer. Today, if you have an iPhone, typically it's a teeny tiny box. It's very, very, very tiny. And that small box is enough to charge your iPhone. That's moving away from a transformer heavy inverter to a electronic heavy inverter. This is a similar story in my view. This is also a corollary to the discussion of, are you an appliance company or are you a consumer electronics company? When I look at string inverters, I tell myself this is much closer to making an appliance. When I look at microinverters and how microinverters are made, I tell myself this is much closer to making a consumer electronics product. And when you understand the history of Enphase and that they were very close to Cypress Semiconductors, you understand why the microinverter is much closer to consumer electronics than it is to industry and heavy industry. And you have this competition between heavy industry, which is string inverters, against microinverters, which is consumer electronics industry. And history is showing us right now that consumer electronics businesses do much better than appliance-based businesses. I have made this similar case when I talk about Tesla, right? Teslas are consumer electronic goods. Cars are giant appliances. Very different concept, very different way to look at how you do business. Moving on. So now that I've described the difference between microinverters and string inverters, this is something that any investor in Enphase needs to make up their mind on and make a decision, because microinverters have been shown to be superior for solar applications in so many different ways, and therefore string inverter manufacturers have come up with this patch, which they call optimizers. And optimizers is something that they put under each solar panel, just like you put a microinverter, except in the case of Enphase, under each solar panel, you put a microinverter and you're done. You're done. That's it. You got your AC current. In the case of string inverters, right, like those that a lot of major manufacturers still sell, like Solar Edge, not only do you need to put optimizers behind each panel that are just as big as microinverters, and you need to buy those, of course. So not only do you need to do that, but you still need to put a heavy string inverter in your garage to then turn DC into AC. So you have a redundancy in steps whenever you install string inverters with optimizers that you don't have when you just have one microinverter, right? And I'm not getting into the warranty issues, but let's talk about briefly the benefits of microinverters. One of the benefits of microinverters is that they last twice as long in general as string inverters. And you know that by looking at the reliability metrics and looking at the warranties. 25-year warranty is pretty common for microinverters, not the case for string inverters. So they last twice as long. That's very important, by the way. That's very important because your solar panels, we don't really know how long they last, but solar panels that were set up in the 80s are still around and they're still making energy. Sure, they're at 60% what they used to make, but they're still making energy. There's no moving parts in solar panels, right? So that's one of the major benefits. Another benefit is you have no single point of failure with microinverters. If you have a string inverter and your string inverter fails, doesn't matter whether you have optimizer or not, if it fails, your whole system is down, right? With microinverters, you don't have that issue. You don't have a single point of failure. Each panel is its own system, as its own inverter, and if one inverter fails, the system keeps going. It just loses the equivalent of one solar panels, right? Okay. Single panel shutoff, no connection of panel in series. So this is very, very important. For example, in the world of emergency, which is one of the reasons why they added optimizers. The single panel shutoff means that whenever you have a microinverter system, you can shut off power at each panel, so that if there is an emergency or if you need to have a contractor come to the house, you can just shut off the power at the panel level very safely. String inverter manufacturers add optimizers in order to do that. And a lot of city codes require a single panel shutoff so that firefighters, for example, do not get electrocuted if there were to be any issues. Another benefit is that you have no connection of panels in series. One of the benefits, and string inverters, by the way, you have to connect panels in series. Now, I know optimizers, many of them actually try to handle that, and that's a good thing. Good for people buying these systems. It's a good thing that they do that. But optimizers are nonetheless a patch in my view. That's just my view. But the problem with panels in series, the historic problem, is that if you have shadows on one end of your roof, you have a bunch of shadows, then your whole system, the power generated by your whole system, is going to be taken down to the weakest panel or to the weakest link, because you're wired in series and not wired directly, and not each panel is its own system. So as far as exploitation of your system goes, you produce more energy when you don't have panels that are wired in series. That's the whole idea. Other benefit of microinverters: they're upgradable, easily repairable, etc. Like, let's say you just want to add a few solar panels, you can do that easily. With string inverters, if you have one string inverter that's maxed out, you need to add another string inverter. So it makes your installation grow in much bulkier setups, if that makes any sense. Like, it's like, yeah, you have 12 panels, your inverter is optimized for 12 panels. If you want to improve, sorry, you got to get another 12 panels. You can't get just 2 more panels. You can do that with microinverters. And microinverters, finally, they facilitate the management of power with software at the individual panel level. And this, with AI today, there's a lot of things you can do. There's a lot of benefits that can be had from managing panels individually. The system can tell you which panel is performing, which is not. It can tell you which panel to clean if you need to clean one. It can troubleshoot. It can predict. There's a lot of wonderful things that can happen with individual level panels that does not happen when you have to manage a string of panels that are connected, say 12 of them in series. So this is just for the benefit of microinverters. I am fully aware that there is a debate on this. If you go on YouTube, plenty of debates on what's better and what's not better. Per my analysis, microinverters are better. I am saying this as objectively as I can. But that's just my opinion. But you have a lot of legacy thinking that is very pro string inverters because they're reliable, etc., etc., etc. One last thing that I'll say now, and not at the stage of installer network, but one of the major issues, of course, is that microinverters are easier to set up and easier to install because string inverters are very heavy. And this may not seem like it matters, but when you are an installer, and you're going to do, 2 installs a day, this changes everything for your crew, because your crew is going to be like, okay, I can install these tiny microinverters, that's very easy for me, or I have to install a string inverter and I have to get 3 people to help me lift it, and you can. Anyways, it's a minor thing, but over the long run, the microinverters, I believe, are better for installers, or at least installers per what I follow, I voiced that they much prefer install microinverters because they're just not nearly as heavy. I'll talk more about the ease of installation in a second. Let me move on now to Enphase versus competition, and this time I'm going to talk about the ecosystem. And the ecosystem is so important. Ecosystems, provided that there is no new breakthrough innovation, that's always that's always a major issue. That's always Achilles' heels. Like whenever you start talking about moats, like switching costs, for example, that would be a moat. You're always threatened by the fact that a new technology comes around and makes your whole ecosystem irrelevant. Right, so that could be one issue. But aside from that, and provided that this is the revolution of the time, this is the revolution of the day, we just got to get into ecosystem. So what's an example of an ecosystem? For example, the Apple ecosystem. If you are an Apple customer and you have everything Apple, it's going to be very hard for you to switch to anything else but a Apple product because you've already invested this much time and this much money acquiring everything Apple. And if, let's say, if you have all this setup, are you going to get a PC? It's highly doubtful that you're going to do that because everything walks together, such that if you have a Mac, an iPhone, an Apple TV, and you're looking at a watch, you're not even going to consider an Android watch because it's not going to walk together, or very, very tenuously, it's not going to be compatible. We see ecosystems created all around. It's very important for companies to be first to create their ecosystem. Let me go out on a tangent here, although this is battery still, but I don't know if you know this brand. It's called Ryobi Tools, and essentially this is a brand that if you get just a few tools in this brand and a few batteries, yeah, you're never switching to another brand. That's not possible because your battery walks for hundreds of different tools. And so whenever you want to go ahead and buy another power tool, you're probably going to get this brand because this brand has all of the tools. That's an ecosystem. Once you're locked into an ecosystem, you don't get out of the ecosystem. Now, why is this relevant for Enphase? Because Enphase is doing that. Enphase is creating an ecosystem. It's creating its own ecosystem for energy independence. And this is with all of the implications. I mean, this is a little bit of electronics. This is a little bit of tools and DIYers, and maybe you do the yard on Sundays. This is very meaningful. This is more minor. In the case of energy, however, there's few things more meaningful than energy. Going back to slide one, let me refer back to the technological revolution that I described in slide one. Like, if you have a full roof of solar panels, this is so many benefits. This is charging your EVs. This is cooling and heating your homes. This is maybe extra income that you get from either feeding in energy into the grid or running a server. This could be your food. This could be your water generation. Energy is really at the core of everything you do. This is your entertainment, of course. The economy is powered by energy. So creating an ecosystem for the individual home energy and energy independence, to me, is extremely powerful. And when I look at Enphase, I see the beginning of them doing that because they're following everything of the code, right? Like, say, the Ryobi code, that's kind of what they're following. Upgradable and modular. So what do I mean by that? Do you want just 2 panels and 2 microinverters to erase your electric bill? You can, right? You can have, and this is actually very popular in Europe. Let's say you just have a teeny tiny roof space and you just want to put 2 solar panels to reduce your electric bill. You can put 2 solar panels, 2 Enphase microinverters, plug them in to any outlet on your house, off your house. And this will lower your electric bill, such that whenever the sun is shining, there's power coming into your system and powering your fridges, your TVs, whatever is always on. So you can start very small with an Enphase system, just like you can start very small with an Apple system or the Ryobi system. You can start with just a phone or with just a tool. Same with Enphase. You can start very small. Right? But you can also decide to go medium, right? You can say I just want to have 12 panels and feed my energy back into the grid, and I don't want a battery. I don't want energy independence. I just want to take advantage of say NEM free in California, which is gone now, but let's assume it's still around. You say I just want to feed in energy into the grid and make a little money feeding some energy back into the grid and use the grid as battery. You can do that. That's not nearly as involved. That's a little more involved than 2 panels, but that's not as involved as a whole ecosystem. But you can do that. Then what if you want to add a battery later because you want to be independent? You can add the battery later on, just like with Ryobi. You can buy a tool later on, and you can buy a laptop later on, right? You can do that. What if you get an EV one day and you want to add an EV charger? You can do that. They sell EV chargers now. Enphase is getting into EV chargers, right? What if you want to expand your solar panels? You can do that too. And it's all managed in one app. So that is what I mean by the ecosystem. And as we'll see when you get into the company, they're releasing new products all the time. Who knows what consumer electronics product will be added to the whole house energy system in the future. But right now, this is what the Enphase system looks like. This, to me, is only called to increase, right? I mean, at some point, there will be a revolution in the AC system, in the AC world, and air conditioning of your house. I don't know if Enphase will have its own version of a modern heat pump, but if they do, it fits into the ecosystem, right? There's many more applications that you can have with energy, and Enphase can add them with their ecosystem. They're building this upgradable ecosystem that can evolve with you through time, just like the simple examples of these two ecosystems, Apple or Ryobi. This is very powerful. This is a switching cost. And as long as there is no radical innovation that, I don't know, makes energy pointless, who knows? That's possible, but I doubt it. I believe this will be a very powerful ecosystem. So, let me move on away from the ecosystem. Let me move on to the next phase, which is the installer network, which is a major plus for Enphase. So Enphase makes a difference between clients and consumers. If you're a marketer, you probably see what I mean. There's a difference between the end users and the people that really Enphase deals with on a daily basis for its sales. And Enphase really sells its products through installers. And the installer network, which is at more than 1,200 installers right now, that installer network is one of the strongest out there. And why does Enphase need an installer network? Well, unlike a Ryobi or an Apple system, whenever you deal with solar, you're dealing with roofing, you're dealing with electric, you're dealing with permits. I would argue that all three of these are very often where the limit is for most do-it-yourselfers. Like if you even if you're even if you're a very handy person, I think electric and permits you're fine. But I know a lot of extremely handy people who wouldn't do roofing. Roofing is a hard pass for a lot of people because you're getting on the roof 2 stories high sometimes, and you're just not willing to take that risk, especially with bulky, large solar panels. Many people, I would argue. So anyways, now that we've established that you need someone to install it who's actually a professional, because roofing is a hard limit for most people, then you realize that Enphase needs an installer network, right? This is what I say here. Amazon, as its DSPs, the delivery service partners, right? All of these Amazon trucks that you see in the streets, they don't belong to Amazon. It's independent companies who deliver for Amazon. Right? Coca-Cola as its bottlers, and Enphase as its installers. It needs a network of installers. So if you invest in Enphase, you also invest in the network of installers. And Enphase does so much to please its installers, and it is succeeding at pleasing its installers. This is an example of their app, for example. They do an app that does everything from design and proposal to financing and contracting to permit plan sets. But if you follow all of their installer interface. You also know they've purchased a major solar leads generation website where whenever you go online and try to get a solar quote, it actually belongs to Enphase, and it like refers you to a local Enphase installer. They are highly focused on installers. We'll see at the end of the video that Badri, the CEO, actually meets with installers weekly and understand the installer needs. But what I'm going to say is Enphase does very much to please its installers, and it is succeeding. So this is anecdotal evidence, of course, but I've been around solar for a while, and it's a topic that interests me. So I always ask whenever I see a solar pro. Recently, I went to a home and garden show down here in Texas. 9 out of 9 installers that I talked to recommended Enphase. That was mind-boggling. Some of them only installed Enphase. Again, mind-boggling, right? It's like, it's very interesting. My brother still lives in Europe, France more specifically. We come to the same conclusion. Enphase is extremely strong in Europe, extremely strong in France. Evidence suggests from all of my YouTube search from Australian folks that, yes, Enphase is very strong in Australia and leading in Australia. And they keep entering and competing aggressively in new markets. Recently, Brazil was a new market that we were very excited to enter, but they keep entering new international markets. We'll see later that Europe is really their biggest market. I mean, their highest growth market, not biggest in size. US is still the biggest for Enphase, but in terms of speed of growth, Europe is actually very big for Enphase. So yeah, they do so much to please the installer. The installer network is of the utmost importance to them. Enphase also uses product design and customer service to please the clients. And what do I mean by product design? Well, if you look at how the products are designed, they're very easy to set up, very easy to install. They're quote unquote idiot proof, so that if you have like a new trainee, they understand it intuitively without having to go through too much training. I told you before when we were talking about string inverters, one of the things Enphase promotes is of course, you're not going to break your back because Enphase is a light system to install. You don't have to deal with a heavy inverter. And this goes to the other products that they have. Like, for example, the new batteries that they're designing, they are a modular system of battery, which is, again, light and easy to install, because the issue is that if you're going to install, say, a Tesla Powerwall, that's a huge, heavy chunk that installers are not always willing to install. So anyways, these are tiny things that really add up. And that's the essence of customer service anyways. Like it's tiny improvements that at the end of the day make a whole world of difference. Enphase is very known for their customer service. They're customer centric. They pride themselves of having no wait time at their call center. When you call someone, you get someone on the phone right away. You don't have any wait time. This is what they're emphasizing. They realize where our sales comes from. And Enphase not only is a technology company, which I think has the right technology, they have an ecosystem that makes it hard to switch, but they are also a marketing machine because they have an installer network which is very adequate, for the modern buyer of solar. So the installer network is a major plus for Enphase in my view. And let me move on to the competition, which is what always comes up in the comment. What about the competition? What about XYZ whenever I talk about Enphase? So let me talk a little bit about the competition. So first of all, be sure that the company that you're identifying as a competitor of Enphase is in fact a customer of Enphase. And by that I mean, oftentimes, I will see an old inverter with an old form factor with a different name on it, and that's clearly an Enphase product. That's clearly an Enphase product, but it just doesn't have the name Enphase on it. It just doesn't have a name Enphase on it. Let me give you an example of that. Well, if you know the history of Cypress and SunPower belonging to Cypress, you will understand this. But still, nonetheless, like SunPower does not make microinverters. They're Enphase's microinverters that are just branded SunPower. And this is true for so many different brands. If you go on their website, they show you just a sample of their customers, right? But you're like, okay, I'm buying these solar panels. They come with microinverters. They have competition or Panasonic. No. It's just Enphase being installed in the back, right? This is a company that has a third-party business where they will sell microinverters to other companies, right? And not always brand it as Enphase. So Enphase is a leading provider of microinverters to third parties, right? It's not always easy to tell, actually. It's not always easy to tell. They will sometimes keep old form factors for 3P products. There are products that I see out there that are microinverters, and I wonder still if it's Enphase or not, and I'm not so sure. That it's not Enphase. Like, it's not always that obvious. And so when this company is analyzed, I believe it's important to identify and realize, is this actually a competitor that we're dealing with? Or is this a client of Enphase that's just selling Enphase branded otherwise? If you look at a lot of documentaries on solar, the documentaries often, and I'm talking from legitimate news sources, etc., often mention that Enphase is a quasi-monopoly. And we know it's a quasi monopoly. Batteries mentioned it indirectly multiple times in the call. Sure, they have new competition coming here and there, but they are still a quasi monopoly in terms of their scale for that system. Microinverter and Enphase are still synonymous. Not saying there won't be more competition coming in someday. But for now, they are the leading. So now that we've established that they're the leading player in microinverters, we also need to talk about string inverter companies. So string inverter companies are the main competitor of Enphase. No doubt about this. They're the main competitors of Enphase, of which the best string inverter company, or the company that's the biggest competitor of Enphase, is actually SolarEdge. In my view, SolarEdge, they're the most credible competitor for solar, in my opinion. Of course, they bet on a traditional string inverter and an optimizer. And, you know, I'll be honest, looking at their website, they do a very good job with their optimizers. They do a very good job with their optimizers. I personally prefer Enphase for a lot of the reasons that I've discussed when we're on the microinverters versus string inverters slide. But this would be a question that you would need to answer for yourself. Like, you need to form your own opinion on optimizers. Go read on optimizers. Go read on string inverters. You know, optimizers help out with a lot of issues, but they still don't change the fact that the string inverters is, in my view, an appliance. It still doesn't change that fact. So my humble view here is that it's double the work. It's not the first principle thinking. The first principle thinking is to go with microinverters. Teeny tiny box under each panel. Turns it into AC, turns power into AC, and that's it. That's just my view. You know, so why do you want to do double the work? Why do you want to do optimizers plus a main string inverters when you can just do a microinverter under each panel and reduce the amount of work for installers, especially considering that the cost of labor is still a major cost in installing these systems. But there's a debate about that. And you know, I may be wrong. There's a debate about that. To me, microinverters are clearly winning. There could be room for both. There could be room for both of them. But to me, microinverters over the long run, like if you look at 10 years out, to me, they're going to win. And that doesn't mean that SolarEdge will not one day release their own microinverters and realize that. But you know, once you have new industries, it takes time for these standards to occur and to come. So anyways, this is just a few points. And the last point that I'll make about competition. So we've established, in the microinverter space, be careful. Make sure you actually know whether they're a competitor or not. I have not seen a credible competitor in the microinverter sector. So if microinverter is the technology that's going to win, Enphase is going to win. That's my view. The second point is, if the technology of microinverters is not winning and string inverters are going to win, then SolarEdge is in the best spot to win. This is not my bet. It could also be a duopoly situation where you have both of them win. So that's the second point. And let's keep in mind that right here, we've just talked about inverters, right? I mean, that's still what we've talked about, inverters, right? Turning DC into AC. There is another side of a business which eventually could become much bigger than the inverter business, which is the everything else business, the EV charger, the batteries, etc. And this is where I have an insight from Australia, because of course, both SolarEdge and Enphase are launching their batteries. They're launching their chargers. They have this whole ecosystem view that they're both going after. But the question is, again, do you always have to go head to head against one another? And this is something, an insight that I have from Australia, is the idea of compatibility. And actually, if you look at what's happened in Australia, they're putting compatible systems. So you can envision a system with inverters, microinverters from Enphase, and then a combiner box from Enphase, and then maybe you have the battery from the Tesla Powerwall because you like the Tesla Powerwall better, and then maybe you have a charger from Tesla. And the whole idea is that everything can work together, right? Even though it's different brands. And of course today it's the more skilled installers that do that for you. Not all installers are able to do these systems that use different brands and they make them work together. But if you look at the pragmatism of the Enphase CEO, they recently acquired this German company that does hub communication that allows compatibility between these systems. So I think compatibility is going to be a big question in the future. Being able to have some sort of an API which allows your Enphase systems to work with, say, a Tesla battery or a Tesla charger, or maybe just an Enphase battery. Maybe someone just wants to buy the Enphase batteries and they want to have a string inverter, and that needs to work together too. And so compatibility is going to be a key to growth. So that's why competition is not always the main assumption of business. We know today, I mean, modern day businesses do not always compete, right? Modern day businesses are friends sometimes. You know, when I talk on this channel about STEM and Tesla megapacks, right? STEM is the main installer of megapacks, but they also sell Chinese megapacks. So they're both a competitor and a friend, right? Your head-to-head competition is not always the way to go. And modern day companies understand that. Modern day companies understand that head-to-head competitions just kills your returns. And, you know, that's why if you look at the history of Apple and Microsoft, right? What saved Apple from bankruptcy? It was a partnership with Microsoft, allowing the Office suite and our Office tool to work on Mac. So it's not always head-to-head competition. I want to point that out. So that's going to be a big thing, the mix and match capabilities, because I can understand that you can love Enphase, but still own a Tesla and still want to have the Tesla charger. And so in that case, if you love Enphase for your home, but you still want to have a Tesla and a Tesla charger, all of these things need to work together. And actually, Elon Musk already stated that, for example, bidirectional charging would be working on Tesla soon as well. So there's a lot of compatibility questions that are going to come into play. Anyways, this is all I have to say about competition. Keep in mind that this is a growing pie. It's what is it? What do they say? A rising tide lifts all boats. There will be multiple winners, in my view, in this space. Let me move on to management. So now we're moving into the company, talking about the company and the company alone and the management of this company. So let me briefly talk about the CEO. So the CEO is a very humble man, and he actually just goes by Battery. If you look at the conference calls or even articles about him, he goes by Battery. Battery is the CEO. Battery has a very interesting story. Again, I'm less of a leadership person. I'm more into the fundamentals of a company, but I'll say a few good things that I like about the leadership of Battery for Enphase. Battery is someone who emphasizes thrift and simplicity. He grew up simply in India, right from a modest household, came to the U.S., lived his American dream, started from nothing, essentially to I think a net worth of 400 million or something like that, and he's kept his cool. He's kept his old ways. Mostly flies coach, right? Long preferred driving a Prius to save money. Right, long after he was a successful executive at Cypress Semiconductors. He has a background in process design and chip design and also material science. So battery, he's an engineer. He's an engineer, and I don't have a problem with people with management backgrounds and becoming managers after business school. But given the fact that this is a technological company at the heart of a technological government revolution in a technological field, I love that he's an engineer and a very good engineer at that. And actually, if you read on his to his Glassdoor reviews, well, keep in mind, like, you got to be careful when you use Glassdoor, because Glassdoor is a popularity contest among your employees. It's yes, if you're going to be very popular among your employees, sometimes it's tough to know whether you're actually a great leader or whether you're maybe giving too much benefits and paying too much attention to certain aspects of a firm that should not be emphasized. But one of the things that Battery did that got him a lot of bad press is that he infamously moved the entire engineering staff to India and cut a bunch of US engineers, and they were not too happy. So he's one to make swift moves. And he calls himself, he says, "I'm tough. There's no question about it." He says he requires engineering excellence, right? So we got a little bit of a Elon-esque, Elon Musk type of behavior here. Very customer-centric CEO, just like Bezos, or at least learn from the Bezos school. He wants a glitch-free product for installers, meets with installers 10 times weekly. Lots of good things going for him. Battery's been CEO since 2017, so almost 6 years. The tenure is good. And of course, since he came so late in the life of the company, he doesn't own as much, but he owns 2% of the company, which is still very, very meaningful. And there's no denying, in my view, that he is committed to this company. On the call, you can say that he's a straightforward, no-nonsense type of person on the conference call. And I've listened to quite a few conference calls from him, and I like him. I think he's a great CEO. Noteworthy to say that he has a strong connection with TJ Rogers, which is the founder of Cypress Semiconductor, a very successful company before it got acquired by a German conglomerate. And Battery was a former long-time employee of Cypress, and he was an executive at Cypress. So he's been mentored by some of the best businessmen out there, such as TJ Rogers, which is very impressive. To me, the management is more than adequate, and it's important to not just get hung up on, say, a Glassdoor review. Because if your entire engineering departments move to India, you're not going to be happy about it, unless of course you're in India and you're getting a new job, then you're happy. But I don't know if it makes any sense. Management's good. Typically, leadership and management takes a second role in my analysis, but in the case of Enphase, it is great, and I very much like it. I like him as a CEO. Always great to hear Battery on the calls. Let me move on now to scale and optionality. So, Enphase is setting itself up for major scale. What do they do today? Well, they are releasing new microinverter, and they are really setting themselves up for inverters that can handle bigger solar panels. That has been a quest for Enphase for a long time, to handle bigger and bigger solar panels, because remember what we said about the efficiency of solar panels in the future, right? They're soon gonna get to 1,000 watt per panels, and so you gotta work on improving those microinverters, and they've been doing that. If you read the calls, if you read the letters, you see a little Apple-like description. Our costs have gotten 40% better. This has gotten 30% more efficiency. These inverters get better with time, year after year, because they are semiconductors, just like solar panels. They are semiconductors, and the potential per home is about $4,800 right now of microinverters per home is what the potential they estimate. And if you add batteries and load controllers and all of the other systems, you're more than doubling the potential per single family home. So right now, the potential per single family home is $12,000 is what they estimate their potential gain is from single family home, which is absolutely major. Remember, and I'll get to this in the numbers and forecast, but the penetration for Enphase is only 4% right now. Only 4% in the US. So you see 100 homes when you drive around, you only see 4 of them with solar panels. So huge potential, right? There's 83 million single family homes in the US. Most of them don't have solar panels. And they estimate the potential per home is 12,000. And we're just talking about the US. There's way more homes in Europe and more potential in Europe, right? So anyways, manufacturing sites, they're setting themselves up to be a global company. It's noteworthy to say that a lot of their manufacturing is made by Flex, which is a third-party company. Therefore, they are CapEx light. They don't have to own these factories and invest a lot of money in these factories. They have a partner that manufactures for them. This is kind of like Apple. Most of their headcount is in India. We can see the thrift of the CEO again. It's cheaper to get labor from India, 51%, 37% North America. And so this is a lean company. The addressable market by 2025 is estimated to be $23 billion, which is absolutely enormous. The revenue of Enphase is nowhere near these numbers. And they have a lot of optionality, which is what I love about the company. For example, they're getting into the small commercial market for North America and Europe. I don't know, a bakery, small shop, whatever, wants to install solar panels. Well, they are releasing bigger microinverters, bigger and bigger. And this, of course, also goes well with the 11 cents incentive from the IRA Act, even especially if they're made in the US, 11 cents per watt. You can clearly see, you can clearly get nice checks whenever one of those come out and really reduce your cost of goods sold thanks to these incentives that are set to expire in 2035. Think about it. That's crazy. Anyways, they have more products. They have a 5 kilowatt battery, modular battery. The batteries get better. This is third generation. Each generation, the battery stores more power, gets better and better. They did a major EV charger acquisition with Clipper Creek. Now they're launching bidirectional EV chargers, which are going to be a tricky technology. And I believe Enphase as one of the leads in this because they acquired a pure player in making a charger. And making a charger is not always as straightforward as it seems. There's a lot of knowledge that you have to have about batteries and battery longevity and making sure that you don't kill your batteries, right? You need charge controllers, etc. It's true electronics, right? That's why when I invest in this space, right? When I invest in the space of solar, I want to invest in an electronics company, in a consumer electronics company. I don't want to invest in an appliance company, right? Or in a company that is just good at mass manufacturing solar panels. To me, this is one of the reasons why they're so good. This is what I discussed in the last slide. This is their recent acquisition, which is the connectivity router and controller, which is going to help Enphase connect with different third-party systems, in this case, chargers, EV chargers, and heat pumps. But there will be more of connectivity. That's going to be one of the big challenges of this space and innovation coming up. So, in sum, this company has a lot of scale coming up and can achieve very, very large scales just by going after most single-family homes that do not have solar yet and do not have the benefits that we discussed in the macro trend, the cheapest energy, charging your car at home, i.e. eliminating your gas bill, no more gas bill because it's your solar panels that charge your home, right? Extra power for so many things. So not only do they have huge scale potential in the current business, but they also have future business coming up. So this is a business that has a potential for exponential growth. When you're not only increasing the number of customers, but increasing the number of stuff that you can sell to each of these customers, you can really get explosive growth. And that's one of the reasons why I really love Enphase, very much so. And let me move on and conclude or begin to conclude now with the numbers and the forecast. Now, I've done a lot of videos on this channel talking about the numbers and the forecast. But this time I'm going to try to be less specific because I hope that this video will be watched a year or two from now. So I want it to still be relevant 2 years from now. I'm going to be less specific, broader, but still get a sense of the business and the forecast. So as of June 2023, right now, we are June 2023. I believe Enphase, I would summarize the Enphase business as a tale of two worlds. Enphase is still mostly a North American company. 75% of their business comes from Canada, the US, and Mexico. That business has grown a lot, 61% year over year, according to the last quarterly number. The last quarter, 61% year over year growth. Major growth for 75% of the business. Now, international, what they call international, but in fact is mostly Europe. Europe dwarfs all of the other regions, right? I mean, even if you compare say Australia, I believe Australia is something like 40 million people. Europe is 450 million people. Don't hold me accountable on those numbers of inhabitants, but it's an order of magnitude bigger. So Europe obviously is going to be a huge number of his business. Right now, international, that I'm going to loosely refer to as Europe, is 25% of the business. So not meaningless, but nonetheless, North America is still 3 times bigger. Right, so Europe is for now 3 times smaller, but by virtue of being smaller, it's also growing twice as fast. So Europe grew 132% year over year growth in Europe. So very strong growth in North America. Mind-boggling, hard to understand growth in Europe. Clearly, that S-curve is starting to kick in my view. And battery this year, so if you're watching this in 2023, just know that battery did not give too clear of a guidance. Aside from they expect a slowdown in the USA in 2023 due to interest rates and the end of NEM 3. So it's important to note that there may be a little bit of skewing of the North American numbers because a lot of customers in California were rushing to get solar because of the end of NEM 2, which is the regulation in California, the feed-in tariffs regulation, the end of NEM 2 and the introduction of NEM 3. So there may be a bit of a slowdown in California, in the US, and therefore that means that the US may grow a little slower, at least for the year to come. So if you watch this video 2 years from now, that won't matter too much. But Badri on the call many times has said he's very excited about NEM 3 because NEM 3 all of a sudden monetizes batteries. NEM 3 makes a battery valuable. So as far as Enphase goes, if you go back to a potential video, you can see that batteries, you make even more money on batteries than you do on microinverters. So over the long run, the fact that they move to NEM 3, which is essentially paying you nothing most of the year for your energy, aside from a few months out of a year where they pay you a lot more for your energy, NEM 3 is making batteries profitable and giving an ROI on profitable. NEM 3 essentially prevents customer from using the grid as a battery, which means that customers now have to buy a battery. And of course, this is going to be very good for the revenue growth of Enphase. So battery is very neutral in this, in the sense that it's going to likely benefit them in the long run, because now you can sell a battery, wherever in the past under NEM 2 you had a hard time trying to sell a battery. Anyways, this is just the US, and this business is less and less a US-only business, more and more an international business. And Battery says that the business in Europe looks brighter than ever. And when you see those numbers, it's easy to understand why it is so bright in Europe. People are adopting solar left and right in Europe. They're further along in that cost curve than in the US. And the CEO did call the guidance conservative, or at least his words on the guidance pretty conservative. And he's a pretty conservative guy to begin with. So that's interesting. Anyways, typically when we don't have too clear of a guidance from the CEO, what I do is I look at what the analysts, if you look at the aggregate of all of the analysts, right now they predict 41% revenue growth over the next 12 months. If you do the aggregate, that growth is going to come much stronger in Europe, a little bit of a slump in the US because of California, but it will pick back up. This is a secular trend, and 41% revenue growth is absolutely nothing to sneeze at. It's wonderful. So where do I stand personally on revenue growth? And on this channel, revenue growth to me is the most important thing, because I try to get out of a company by the time by the time there's no more growth. And the company is not trading on the basis of growth, but trading on the basis of price to earnings ratio, is when I want to be gone on the company, because I'm here for growth. I want product adoption. Revenue growth, in my view, for most of the stocks at Polo, is a great proxy for product adoption. Where is that going to be? Analysts are saying 41%. What I say is that I don't know. But in my view, Enphase, over the long run, is going to exceed, clearly exceed the 30% yearly revenue growth. And that's, I think, going to be at least, over a decade. I know it sounds like a lot, but that is my take after this analysis. This is not investment advice, of course, but let's just take a second to look at the data that Battery is telling us on residential real estate from the latest annual shareholder report, right? The latest letter. We know that we are at 4% adoption in the US and 10% adoption in Europe, right? These numbers are just meaningful enough to tell us that this is not a pipe dream. This is not anecdotal. Solar is not anecdotal. Solar is real. They've convinced millions of people in two of the richest spots out there to spend, quite a bit of money for this system. So that's a real innovation. We have, it's not 0.0004, then that'd be a pre-revenue company, and I'd stay away. This is enough for us to know that this is meaningful. And to me, this is the beginning of this is the beginning of a product adoption curve. That's the way I look at it. Beginning of a production adoption curve, 4% in the US, 10% in Europe. That's just enough to get noticed. We are going to ride that curve up, I believe, until 80% of single-family homes have adopted the product. And when it's 75 to 80%, that's when you ask the question, should you sell? And that is my style of investing. Get in early at real signs of product adoption. Get out at the end or at the early signs of a slowdown. In my view, this megatrend has just begun, and I go back to slide 1 here to know the underlying technological revolution. This megatrend has begun. This product I view as a product that sells itself, that is going to sell itself. You are selling free energy, free gas is what you're selling. The value proposition is absolutely tremendous. Anyways, and you get the tax credit and etc. There's so much going on. So, in my view, today, and that's why Enphase and Tesla, I put both as tier 1 stocks for me, no investment, but for me, they're tier 1 stocks. To me, buying Enphase right now, or for that matter, Tesla, even though Tesla has ran up a little bit over the past month, but not relevant if you watch this video a year from now. Buying Enphase right now is akin to buying iPhone, Apple, to buying Apple, the stock, the iPhone company, right? Apple, in 2010. When US adoption was 10% and 4%. I think if one gets solar right now, you're still early. You're still early understanding solar and getting the revolution that this is and that this is going to be. And so most of the growth is ahead of us. And so I view buying Enphase or Tesla right now as I would view buying Apple back in 2010, 2011. And of course, the returns have been just mind-boggling and outstanding for companies like that. In the meantime, Enphase is still trading at a cheap valuation because of a US slowdown due to NEM 3 in California and interest rates. Interest rates are slowing down the sales, but I believe interest rates are temporary. The current rates are highly temporary. That's why the channel is named Beat the Denominator, by the way. Topic for another video. And the current valuation right now, so it's trading at enterprise value over free cash flow of 26 times. Run rate is 896 million. Enterprise value is 24 billion. So in my view, this is a very value price, in my view, for a company that analysts forecast to grow at 41% revenue growth. In my view, this is very much a cheap company for this forecast. And I'll conclude by asking this question, will a top investment of the prior decade, right, the past 10 years, also be a top investment of this decade? And I'm not cherry picking ever any data. So this is, as of the recording of this video, this is the returns of Enphase ever since they went public, compared to Tesla. Tesla went public a little earlier than Enphase. Enphase, the return, so for 11 years, the return of Enphase has been 33% per year. 33% per year for the past 11 years. Tesla, over the same period, has done 51%. Now, keep in mind, I'm recording this video at a time where there's a lot of negativity on Enphase right now. That's why it's been down for the past 6 months. And a time when there's a lot of newfound positivity on Tesla right now, which is why Tesla is up the past 6 months. So the delta between the two seems, fairly high, but nothing. This is outstanding. 33% is an outstanding return. There is nothing to sneeze at for past returns. But not to nitpick, but if I dial back 6 months and look back 6 months, so before we saw the major drop in Enphase, and before we saw the major excitement in Tesla 6 months ago, right? So December 2022, you can see that the returns were much more similar. 42, let's round it to 43%. So 43% for Enphase, 47% for Tesla. Of course, that makes a major difference over an 11-year period, right? $200,000 difference. But still, this to me is one of the rare companies that I view as having the potential of Tesla-esque returns. That's why it, along with Tesla, are my two tier one stocks. They're just outsized position in my portfolio. And I am excited to keep covering Enphase, and I will be referring back to this video in my more precise Enphase coverage that will be coming up on the channel. So anyways, I have no idea how long this video is, but this was not investment advice. This is just entertainment. It obviously takes a long while to do this, so I appreciate if you can like and if you can subscribe. Really appreciate your subscribes and your likes and your support of any kind. Hopefully you listen to this video as a podcast or doing something else, because I realize it's just slides. But anyways, I hope you enjoyed it. No investment advice. Thank you for watching. Have a wonderful day.